I was a courtesan at the house of spring dreams, one who entertained but never sold her body. For him, however, I made an exception. I teased him that since he had taken my virtue, I would have to give myself to him in marriage. With a cold expression, he pushed me away and vanished for months. When I saw him again, he told me he was getting married. Only later did I learn that he was no wealthy nobleman, but the supreme ruler, the Son of Heaven. I stubbornly remained at the brothel, saving myself for him. The other girls called me a fool, saying a man like him would never return. But I didn't believe them. I gently cradled my belly, thinking, what if? That night, a bitter, snow-laced wind howled outside my window. I stared at him with anticipation, only to hear him say, "It is your good fortune to take her place in the peace-offering marriage." The door was heavily guarded. I clutched my handkerchief, my body trembling uncontrollably as I looked at Ethan Valerius. I opened my mouth several times, but couldn't utter a single word. It dawned on me then that the man before me was the supreme ruler of Yuan. My legs gave way, and I knelt before him, speaking words that felt foreign on my tongue. "This humble servant greets your majesty. Long live the emperor." I pressed my forehead to the floor. Ethan Valerius remained silent, and the air in the room seemed to freeze. After what felt like an eternity on the ground, his voice finally reached my ears. "Have the matrons outside come in to dress her and prepare her for the wedding." As soon as he finished speaking, the door was opened from the outside, and two richly dressed old women entered, carrying a heavy, red wedding gown. My heart leaped in alarm. I tried to rise, but one of the women pushed me back down. "Don't move, miss, we old women have a heavy hand. We wouldn't want to injure you by accident." Pinned to the floor, I struggled, craning my neck to look at Ethan Valerius. "Your Majesty, this humble servant does not know what crime she has committed. I beg your Majesty to enlighten me." Ethan Valerius stared at me, his hawk-like eyes seeming to pierce right through me. "That face of yours was born for a peace-offering marriage with Dong Li. It is most fitting for you to go in Jocelyn's place. Be obedient, and I will have the matrons be gentle. You will suffer less that way." I looked at him and sank to the floor in defeat. A suffocating sense of despair enveloped me. A peace-offering marriage in Dong Li? I didn't know how far Dong Li was from Yuan, but rumor had it that King Vorlag was inherently violent and cruel. Not one of the princesses Yuan had sent to Dong Li over the years had met a good end. Though my station was low, Yuan was my home. I did not want to die in a foreign land. I shook my head desperately at Ethan Valerius. "I won't go. Your Majesty, I won't go." Seeing his darkening expression, I realized my mistake. I prostrated myself, striking my head forcefully against the floor. "Your Majesty, this humble servant is of lowly birth, raised in a filthy place like the house of spring dreams. Those sent for peace-offering marriages are all noble ladies from prestigious families. This servant fears she will bring shame upon Yuan. I implore your Majesty to reconsider. The royal we has decided. Put on the wedding gown. The marriage to Dong Li will take place in 3 days." At his command, the matrons seized my arms, holding me fast. Without any modesty, they roughly tore the clothes from my body. I struggled, staring at Ethan Valerius. "No, I don't want to go to Dong Li. I don't want to wear the wedding gown, your Majesty. I beg you, for the sake of what we once, slap." One of the matrons struck me across the face. "How could His Majesty ever be involved with a lowly whore like you? It is your good fortune that His Majesty has taken notice of you. To take another's place in the marriage is a supreme honor. You should be grateful, not spout such outrageous nonsense." I was stunned by the blow. As I stared at Ethan Valerius's retreating back, a sudden feeling jolted my lower abdomen. It was like grasping a final lifeline. I fought wildly against the women holding me. "I am carrying your child." Ethan Valerius dismissed everyone. Only he and I remained in the room. I looked at him, my face full of hope, my lips trembling with nervousness. I cradled my belly and explained frantically, "I didn't mean to hide it from you. I just didn't know how to find you. I don't ask for any status. I only ask that, for the sake of the child in my womb, you do not send me to Dong Li." He stared at me, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Is it over a month?" Thinking he had softened, I nodded vigorously. "Yes, over a month. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl, but it should be a healthy child." Seeing his face turn cold, I regretted my babbling. I lowered my head, wringing my hands, not daring to say another word. After a long moment, Ethan Valerius called out, "Summon the royal physician, as quickly as possible." I let out a small sigh of relief. Calling for the physician must mean he acknowledged the child. Though he appeared cold and heartless, I knew that wasn't who he was deep down. He would surely let me stay for the sake of our child. The royal physician arrived swiftly. The diagnosis confirmed it. I was indeed pregnant for just over a month. Hearing the physician's words, the weight on my heart finally lifted. I stole a glance at Ethan Valerius's profile. I hadn't seen him in months, and he had grown thinner. If I had the chance, I wanted to make him a bowl of fish soup. I wondered if he still remembered the taste from all those years ago. But his next words plunged me into an abyss. "Find a way to get rid of the child. It's best if it leaves no trace, so as not to displease Dong Li." The royal physician took his order and immediately retrieved a pill from his medical case, presenting it respectfully to Ethan Valerius. "Your Majesty, this is an abortion pill. The side effects are strong, but it is effective. After taking it, 3 days of bed rest will conceal any sign of what has happened." Hearing this, I looked at Ethan Valerius in a panic and fell to my knees before him with a thud, tears streaming down my face. "No, please, don't take away my child." Ethan Valerius held the pill, staring at me thoughtfully. "All of you leave us." Once again, only the two of us remained. I crawled to him on my knees, clutching the hem of his robe. "You promised you said you could give me anything I wanted, except a title. I'm begging you, don't take away our child. If you don't want it, I can raise it alone. I beg you." Ethan Valerius stared at me, then slowly crouched down. He reached out to wipe the tears from my face and let out a cold sneer. "A worthless, lowly whore wants to bear my child. Look at yourself. Are you even worthy?" His cool hand gripped my chin, while his other hand brought the pill to my lips. I shook my head frantically, clenching my teeth, refusing to yield. Ethan Valerius's eyes darkened, and his grip on my chin tightened until his knuckles turned white. "Rhiannon Shaw, if you do not go through with this marriage, I will take your life." I looked at his face, remembering how he used to hold me, calling me Shishi over and over. I remembered how he had once clumsily but earnestly combed my hair. He was so gentle with me then. Why was he now so cold, so willing to send me to my death? Tears streamed down my cheeks, dripping onto his hand. He frowned, his voice distant and icy. "Take it." I lowered my gaze and laughed at my own foolishness. He no longer recognized me. Or perhaps he did, but simply felt someone like me was not worth acknowledging. From the very beginning, I was the only fool. Foolish enough to search for him for so many years, so foolish I didn't even dare to reveal myself, only daring to love him silently from afar. But he was no longer the big brother I once knew. He was a heartless butcher. Resigned, I let my head fall as Ethan Valerius forced the pill into my mouth. Its bitterness spread through my mouth. The pill was large and acrid. I gagged and spat it onto the floor. Seeing this, Ethan Valerius's recently calmed eyes flashed with fury. He grabbed my throat and slammed me to the ground. "Rhiannon Shaw, my patience is limited." With my mouth agape, tears and saliva mixing, I swallowed the pill from the floor like a dog. Fearing complications before the wedding, Ethan Valerius had me moved from the House of Spring Dreams to the palace that very night, placing me in the Jade Clarity Pavilion, the closest to his own chambers. During the night, I began to hemorrhage. Blood soaked the sheets, dripped through the bedboards, and pooled on the floor, terrifying the on-duty palace maid. Her sharp screams alerted the eunuch outside, who lit a lantern and ran towards Ethan Valerius's chambers. By the time the royal physician and Ethan Valerius arrived, I was burning with a high fever. The fever was so intense that I was delirious, unable to clearly see who was in the room. I could only make out Ethan Valerius's voice. "Didn't you say the abortion pill was effective? That she would recover after 3 days of bed rest? What is this?" His voice was sharp, and the terrified physician immediately begged for mercy. "Your Majesty, the pill is effective, but it has side effects. These side effects vary depending on the person's constitution. This humble servant has never seen a reaction as severe as the young lady's. Enough nonsense. Save her. If anything happens to her, I'll have your head." Amid the sounds of scurrying footsteps, I felt someone grab my hand and then slam it back onto the bed. Then, the physician's voice again. "Your Majesty, the young lady's abortion has failed. She is bleeding out, I'm afraid she." I managed a faint, delirious smile. Afraid I'm going to die, I thought, death might be for the best. Better than dying in a foreign land like Dongli. If I died here, at least I would be close to my big brother. If she doesn't survive, your daughter will take her place in the marriage to Dongli. Ethan Valerius's vicious voice rang out again, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Then, I drifted into unconsciousness. I don't know how long I slept. When I awoke, the room was filled with warm stoves, and the thick scent of medicine assaulted my nostrils. Someone was holding my hand. I glanced down and was surprised to see Ethan Valerius sitting by my bed. See, he talked a big game about sending me to Dongli in place of the woman he loved, but he cared for me, too. It was just my rotten luck. Looking at his profile, I painstakingly raised my other hand and slowly traced the outline of his face. He looked different from when we were children, but the birthmark was hidden behind his ear. It was his most sensitive spot. I could never be mistaken. I moistened my lips. My throat was terribly dry. I glanced around, and seeing that we were alone, I opened my mouth. This might be the last time I could ever say his name to his face. Moonbeam? The moment the word left my lips, Ethan Valerius's eyes flew open. He stared at me with a fierce gaze and shot out a hand to grip my neck. What did you just say? I immediately shook my head, the sudden movement causing me to cough. He helped me sit up, his gaze growing stranger by the second. Rhiannon Shaw, have I ever told you that you bear a striking resemblance to her? A slight shiver ran through me, and I quickly lowered my eyes again. Ignoring his revulsion, I leaned against his chest for support. I reached up and gently touched the birthmark behind his ear. He trembled and seized my wrist. Courtesans from the House of Spring Dreams are truly born worthless creatures. Since you still have the strength to seduce me, there is no need to postpone the wedding tomorrow. He released my wrist and shoved me back onto the bed. Watching his departing figure, I gave a sad, bitter smile. If going to Dongli would make him happy, then I would go. A heavy snow had fallen last night. Before dawn, matrons and palace maids surrounded me, carrying tray after tray of jewels and ornaments. The two matrons dressing me in the red wedding gown were the same ones from the House of Spring Dreams. Their strength was immense. They turned me over and around, wrestling the complex, crimson gown onto my body. Like a marionette, I was moved from the bed to the dressing table. It was the first time I had seen my own face since entering the palace. The woman in the bronze mirror was hideous. Her face was deathly pale, her lips devoid of any color. Madame Maeve at the House of Spring Dreams used to say I was one of the top beauties in Yuan, destined to make her establishment flourish. It seemed her judgment was off. The maids applied powder to my face and began piling priceless ornaments, the likes of which I had never seen, onto my body and into my hair. As the sun rose, the terrifyingly pale woman in the mirror was transformed into a vision of loveliness, with a face like a peach blossom, so pitiable and beautiful. The matrons supported me as I walked outside. At the palace gate, I saw Ethan Valerius standing a short distance away, and held by his guards was my younger brother, Ronan Shaw. I had poured all my efforts into him, keeping him away from my life, ensuring he could study and do what he loved. I never asked him to be famous. I only prayed he wouldn't squander his life like me, only to be cursed as a shameless whore in the end. I had never met with him all these years. Even Madame Maeve didn't know of Ronan's existence. How did Ethan Valerius find him? What did he intend to do by bringing Ronan before me today? My grip on the matron's arm tightened. The force must have been too much, because she turned and gave me a subtle glare. Why the panic, miss? This marriage is a good thing. His Majesty is sending you off with the honors of a princess. I lowered my eyes to hide my panic. A sharp pain suddenly shot through my abdomen, and a warm liquid trickled down my legs. The blood flowed more and more heavily, dripping onto the path, one drop, then two. The matrons wouldn't let me stop, so I could only force myself forward. The new snow was thick, crunching underfoot. With every step I took, brilliant blossoms of blood bloomed in the snow. I wanted to look back, but the matrons blocked my view. Miss, don't look back. The path ahead is your destiny. Looking back will only bring sorrow. My embroidered shoes soaked in blood, I took small steps, following the matrons to the red sedan chair. They lifted the curtain for me. As I bent to enter, I glanced in Ronan's direction. This would likely be the last time I ever saw him. Just as I was about to step into the chair, Ethan Valerius's mocking voice rang out. "Rhiannon Shaw, you must strive to live. Even if only for your brother's sake, do not die too soon." My body went rigid. A tear fell onto the snow and vanished instantly. He was using my brother's life to threaten me, to ensure I didn't die on the way to Dongli. I bent down and sat in the sedan chair, allowing the palace attendants to carry me the 100 meters to where the Dongli envoys waited. It began to snow again. The soft patter on the roof of the chair had a desolate beauty. I bit my finger and wrote the name Moonbeam on my personal white handkerchief. I opened the curtain and threw it in Ethan Valerius's direction. My fate in Dongli was uncertain. I only hoped Ethan Valerius would spare my brother's life. The handkerchief landed at his feet. He looked panicked. I was in the carriage bound for Dongli. The carriage moved slowly. The wind blew open the window curtain, and I turned my head to see a woman holding Ethan Valerius's arm. She bore a 5 or 6/10 resemblance to me. If I wasn't mistaken, she was the woman Ethan Valerius loved. After a month of travel, we finally reached the territory of Dongli. The moment the carriage stopped, Dongli soldiers roughly dragged me out and pushed me all the way into King Vorlag's grand meeting tent. They threw me to the ground. Before I could even get a clear look at my surroundings, a foot stomped down hard on my hand. I looked up and felt my heart pound with fear at the sight of the man in foreign attire before me. I nervously shrank back, scrambling up from the floor to kneel before him. The peace-offering Princess of Yuan, Rai, before I could finish, the man seized me by the neck and lifted me from the ground. He forced me to stand face to face with him. He moved closer, and just as his lips were about to touch my cheek, I quickly ducked my head. Annoyed, he gripped my chin, forced my head up, and without hesitation, bit down on my lips. He bit and tore at them, drawing blood, sucking it greedily. I cried out in pain, fear consuming me. I struggled frantically, pushing at him with all my might, trying to escape his embrace, trying to leave Dongli, to get away from this monstrous man. He released me with a frown of displeasure, spat the blood from his mouth onto my face, and slapped me to the ground. "You ungrateful wench. The Emperor of Yuan sent you here for my amusement. If you dare resist again, I'll have you thrown to the wolves on the mountain tomorrow. Take her to my tent. Tonight I shall enjoy the beauty sent by the Emperor of Yuan." That night, King Vorlag was very drunk. He stumbled in, dressed in casual clothes, his eyes glazed over. After I was taken to his tent, Dongli maids had held me down in a tub and scrubbed off a layer of my skin before allowing me to lie on his bed. Watching him get closer, I was so terrified my heart felt like it would leap out of my chest. But I didn't know what to do. Ethan Valerius hadn't even left a single handmaiden with me. He must truly want me to die in Dongli. King Vorlag stared at me, his rough hand seizing my wrist, and yanked me from the bed to the floor. My head hit the ground with a thud, but he paid it no mind, squinting at me and muttering something I couldn't understand. The next moment, he was on top of me, tearing the thin silk from my body. Seeing the nearly crazed king, I clenched my fists and endured his torment. The tearing pain sent tremors through my entire body. I turned my head away, forcing back the tears. I told myself if I could just endure it, it would be over. I was, after all, a girl from the House of Spring Dreams. Though I had never sold my body, I had seen all sorts of men and knew what they wanted. If I could just obediently survive this night, King Vorlag surely wouldn't make things difficult for me. "Ah Tong, tell me, why did you betray me? Does he truly love you more than I do?" King Vorlag stared at me in anguish, then grabbed my hair, dragged me from the floor, and hauled me outside. The Emperor of Yuan has some nerve, sending a woman who is not a virgin to deceive me. He threw me out of the tent. Ignoring the pain, I struggled up from the ground, curling into a ball and wrapping my arms around myself. King Vorlag sneered, "Throw this whore from Yuan into the army barracks. Let the men have a taste." Hearing this, I looked up in horror. Ignoring the contemptuous stares of those around me, I crawled on my knees to his feet. I looked up at him, my eyes filled with tears, a picture of pitiable beauty. "Keep me, your majesty. This servant will do anything for you." Madame Maeve used to say that my face, combined with a few tears, was a fatal weapon against men. The night I was with Ethan Valerius, I had cried from the pain. He had held me tenderly, saying my tears could be the death of him. Now, facing King Vorlag, I had no other choice but to use this face to beg for a chance to live. King Vorlag's gaze darkened. He bent down, wrapped his arm around my waist, and lifted me into his arms, taking me wildly in front of everyone. Hearing the lewd cheers from the crowd, I buried my face in his neck. As long as I could live, what did shame matter? Ethan Valerius's perspective 1. I am the son of a handmaiden. The moment I was born, the emperor had my mother drowned in a lake. From a young age, I was raised by the empress. Although she had 2 sons of her own, they were ambitionless and uneducated, destined to never touch the throne. I initially thought my father, the emperor, favored me, which was why he placed me with the empress. It was only when I grew older that I understood. He wanted the empress to ruin me, to ensure I would never have a chance to rise. The empress doted on me, granting my every wish. I spent my days causing trouble with her 2 foolish sons, yet she only ever punished them. She often told me, "Do whatever you want. If anything happens, mother will take care of it for you." While the other princes studied with their tutors, the empress had her palace eunuchs take me out to wrestle and fight crickets. Later, I overheard other consorts scolding their sons. Do you want to end up a useless waste like Ethan Valerius, spending all day eating and playing? His mother was a handmaiden, with no power or influence. She was drowned right after giving birth to him. Even if he excels in his studies and is talented, he's still a worthless pawn. Your father will never give him any chance at a high position. Stay away from him. If I see you playing with him again, I'll break your legs. I was 7 years old then. I learned to be duplicitous. Publicly, I went out to play with the eunuchs. Secretly, I learned from the more knowledgeable ones. I was smart, a quick learner. I mastered the knowledge in the books and secretly mingled with the sons of generals, finding my way into the military camps. In the camps, I appeared to be indulging in pleasure, but in reality, I mastered both archery and riding. I wanted to join the army, to get away from the capital of Yuan. I had no desire to compete for the throne, I just wanted to soar freely in a wider world. I begged my father for a chance. He stared at me with cold eyes, his voice dripping with contempt. Your mother was merely a handmaiden. A handmaiden's son is the lowest of the low. You want to train in the army and come back to fight the other princes for the throne? Ethan Valerius, you are not worthy. That was the first time I truly understood my place in my father's heart. I knew he disliked me, but it was he who gave my mother the chance to bear me. If he hadn't desired her, a woman of her status could never have climbed into his bed. He got her pregnant, then despised her for being a handmaiden, and by extension, despised me, her son. But what had I done wrong? The moment I walked out of the imperial study, I decided I would have that throne. I began to make subtle moves behind the scenes, making my already suspicious father believe that all his sons wanted him to abdicate early. He became paranoid, suspicious of everyone. He grew tyrannical and cruel, quick to draw his sword and cut people down. In half a year, he went through dozens of eunuchs. The entire palace was gripped by fear and gloom. No one dared to even approach the imperial study. My father's illness worsened. He forbade any consort with a son from coming near him, allowing only the consort from Dongli, Lady Jayati, to attend to him. Dowager Jayati was a princess sent from Dongli as a peace-offering bride. In those years, Yuan was prosperous, and Dongli would send large tributes of beautiful women and treasures every year to curry favor. In recent years, Dongli had grown stronger. My father was old, stubborn, and paranoid. To maintain good relations, Yuan, which had never favored peace-offering marriages, made an exception. But Dongli was not like Yuan. The new king of Dongli was ambitious, with his sights set on annexing Yuan. Thus, none of the princesses sent to Dongli were treated well. They all met tragic ends. Though my father was furious and unwilling, he was powerless. To appease Dongli and hold onto his throne, he could only compromise time and again. My father doted on Jayati, perhaps because seeing her reminded him of Yuan's golden age. But Jayati was not as meek and unambitious as she appeared. I once saw her exchanging a bamboo tube with a young palace eunuch. It was clear she was up to no good, but I wouldn't expose her. Only if my father died would I have a chance at the throne. When my father's health deteriorated to the point where he could no longer hold morning court, all his edicts were relayed by Jayati. Everyone had their doubts about their authenticity, but no one voiced them. The court was a roiling undercurrent of schemes, with everyone's eyes on the throne. Word came that the Prime Minister's wife and daughter, who had been missing for 4 years, had returned alive. My father hastily issued 3 verbal edicts, all bestowing favors upon the Prime Minister's family. One was particularly absurd. He named the Prime Minister's legitimate daughter as the Crown Princess-to-be. He hadn't even named a Crown Prince, yet he was in such a hurry to name a Crown Princess. That day, I slipped out of the palace and saw her near the Prime Minister's residence, the long-lost daughter I had seen once at a palace banquet. The girl wore a peach-pink dress and greeted the servants at the gate with a polite nod and smile. Although she looked very much like the real daughter, I felt they were completely different. I couldn't pinpoint what it was, but I had a feeling she was a fake. Moreover, they had been missing for years. With Dong Li's secret arts, creating an identical replica of the Prime Minister's daughter would be no problem at all. And with such a grand spectacle, the real wife and daughter must have been dealt with. No wonder those 3 edicts were issued so hastily. It was to prevent the Prime Minister from seeing through the deception. Now, even if he did, he would have to swallow the bitter pill. The day after I returned to the palace, my father issued another edict. He named me Crown Prince. He despised me so much. How could he possibly make me the Crown Prince? I suspected my father was already dead, and all these edicts came from that woman, Jayati. She thought that because my mother was a handmaiden and I had no maternal relatives, I would be the perfect puppet. If that's what she wanted, I would play the part. Now that I was the Crown Prince, my future ascension to the throne would be legitimate. So I played the fool, becoming the Crown Prince that everyone opposed. The day Jocelyn Thorne entered the palace, I noticed a strange fragrance on her. Though she tried to conceal it, my sense of smell was naturally keener than others. I recognized it as the same scent Jayati wore. The Prime Minister's fake daughter was from Dong Li. I found it all amusing but underestimated their methods. The fragrance on Jocelyn Thorne was a slow-acting poison. Half a month later, my father died. The palace fell into chaos. A group of highly skilled and ruthless soldiers slaughtered all the consorts and princes. Though I had anticipated their plan, the poison took effect after I escaped the palace walls. I forced myself onward, following a path I knew towards the city outskirts, but my unsteady steps caused me to fall into a lake. I floated for a long time. Occasionally, I heard shouts of people searching for me. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I could hear the howling of wild beasts. I don't know how long I drifted or where I ended up. I only knew that I wasn't dead, that I was still conscious. One day, I saw a mother and daughter by the lake. I struggled, trying to get them to save me, but the girl just clung to her mother, sobbing. Then they both ran away. I thought I was done for. But to my surprise, the little girl came back for me that night. She was so clumsy. She just held me and sat by the lake all night. I nearly froze to death. Thankfully, her mother came looking for her at dawn and, taking pity on me, brought me back to their home. The little girl's name was Rhiannon Shaw. She was a stubborn, clumsy, and clueless girl, worse than a newly arrived palace eunuch. She also had a temper. If I so much as ordered her to do something, she would pout and ignore me. Once I coaxed her back into a good mood, she would cling to me, shamelessly declaring she would marry me. She had a younger brother who was still wobbly on his feet and didn't seem very bright either. Fortunately, their mother was a smart woman, with sharp, discerning eyes. But I always felt she didn't quite like me. Or rather, she was wary of me. She didn't ask my name but gave me a new one, telling me that no matter who asked, this was my name, and I had lived here my whole life. I stayed in the house on the mountainside for 2 or 3 months. Once I had mostly recovered, I prepared to leave, but Rhiannon's mother stopped me. She said she had a way to get me to safety. I didn't believe her at first. How could a simple countrywoman protect me? Until I met the righteous and patriotic General Joe. As I was leaving with the general, the woman called out to me. She stared at me, her eyes glinting. "Once you leave, never come back." Ethan Valerius's perspective too, after ascending the throne, I did go back, but the place was long deserted. I could guess what had happened to the family because of me, but I was in a precarious position myself. All I could do was hope to pay my respects once my throne was secure. I pretended to know nothing, named Jayati as the Empress Dowager, and brought Jocelyn Thorne into the palace as my bride. After entering the palace, Jocelyn's demeanor changed completely. She began to act just like Rhiannon Shaw. Upon closer inspection, I realized they looked somewhat alike. For a moment, the thought that Rhiannon was the true Prime Minister's daughter crossed my mind. But then I reconsidered. Given the methods of the people from Dongli, she couldn't possibly still be alive. Still, Jocelyn's imitation of Rhiannon was quite charming. Even after returning to the palace, I often thought of Rhiannon. She was clumsy, yes, but she was truly the only person in my life who had ever been genuinely kind to me. Since Jocelyn knew of Rhiannon's existence, it meant that Jayati was involved in the death of Rhiannon's family. I would avenge them. In the 8th year of my feigned ignorance, Jocelyn finally grew impatient and revealed her true colors. I had long known about her affair with King Vorlag, but I could not tolerate his brazen demand for her to go to Dongli for a peace-offering marriage. I tested Jocelyn, and to my surprise, she asked me to find a substitute to go in her place. The moment I saw Rhiannon in the House of Spring Dreams, I couldn't describe my excitement. After years of celibacy, I lost control and took her. That night, she tenderly asked me to marry her, just as she had all those years ago. But I couldn't. I wasn't sure if she was a spy for Dongli. I couldn't afford a single misstep now, or not only would I lose my life, but Yuan would be plunged into chaos. I distanced myself from her, sent word that I was getting married, and cut off all contact. But sometimes, the longing was too much, and I would secretly watch her from the shadows. I never wanted to send her to Dongli, but Jayati was truly determined to have Jocelyn marry King Vorlag. Sending Jocelyn back to Dongli was like releasing a tiger back into the mountains. I couldn't take that risk. I couldn't ruin everything I had now for one woman. That night, it snowed heavily. I only intended to send her to Dongli, but then she told me she was pregnant with my child. How could a brothel girl be worthy of carrying my child? My mother was at least a proper handmaiden. What was she? I cruelly forced her to abort the child and put her on the wedding sedan. I forced myself to forget her, but on her wedding day, she wrote the name Moonbeam on a handkerchief in her own blood. Jocelyn saw the name on the handkerchief. To ensure Rhiannon's survival, I had to advance my plans. A few months later, I led the army I had been building for 8 years and marched on Dongli. I crushed their lands and personally beheaded King Vorlag. When I saw Rhiannon emerge from the military brothel, I clenched my fists so hard they ached, but I personally brought her back to Yuan. I installed her in the palace. I endured the private gossip of the palace staff, thinking that if I could just overcome my own feelings, Rhiannon could stay. The palace was vast. I could give her any title, but I couldn't get over the hurdle in my own heart. She was tainted. So tainted that I could no longer have her. I allowed Jocelyn to bully her and Jayati to torment her. I offered her empty words of comfort, wanting her to be grateful, wanting her not to hate me. But the way she looked at me had changed. It was different. She said she wanted to leave. Where could she go? Back to the House of Spring Dreams? If the people of Yuan found out about our past, would I be subjected to even more gossip and ridicule? Jocelyn's coronation, as Empress, proceeded as planned, since she had assumed the identity of the Prime Minister's daughter, and the Prime Minister had never denied it for all these years, and with Dongli now destroyed, keeping her by my side could win his allegiance. It was not a bad calculation. But I never expected that on the day of the coronation, Jocelyn would add an archery contest for good fortune, a contest that required me to personally shoot Rhiannon dead. Before the shot, I knew Rhiannon was hidden in the box behind the target. I considered canceling the event, but then I thought, if she were to live in the palace without a title, subjected to gossip, it would be better for her to die. I could grant her a posthumous title and have her buried in the imperial tombs. In 100 years, I would join her in the afterlife and atone for my sins, but I underestimated her place in my heart. The moment she fell from the city wall, I wanted nothing more than to jump down with her. I held her on the wall, offering her everything I could give. And then, unexpectedly, I learned from the Prime Minister that she was his true daughter. Why? Why did the heavens have to mock me so? I avenged her. I killed everyone who had ever harmed her. I had her interred in the imperial tombs. I gave her everything I possibly could, but my heart still ached. I couldn't sleep, night after night. My dreams were filled with Rhiannon's cries. After months of torment, more and more silver strands appeared in my hair, until it was completely white. Looking at my reflection in the bronze mirror, I felt hatred and resentment. I had finally reached the position I had coveted, so why would the heavens treat me this way? But then I thought, I never really wanted the throne in the first place. They forced me here. If I had been an ordinary boy who met Rhiannon in the mountains, and she had begged me to marry her, I would have agreed without hesitation. She was clumsy and foolish, but she was the only one who was ever truly good to me. Another year, another winter. Snow began to fall, just like the day she was sent away. I finished the last jar of daughter's red wine the Prime Minister had given me and leaped from the spot where Rhiannon had fallen. The title she wanted, I can finally give it to her. Rhiannon Shaw's perspective. When I was very young, my mother took me to a monastery to pray. She said I was arrogant, unruly, and uneducated, spoiled by my father and older brother. She wanted me to go with her to the monastery for some quiet reflection, to temper my personality, lest I become unmarriageable. I protested, but my mother still pushed me into the carriage. When we arrived at the monastery at the foot of the mountain, Mother sent the family maids back, saying that spiritual cultivation must be done alone. We lived in the monastery for some time. I found it tiring and boring and begged Mother to take me home, promising to be obedient in the future. Mother put on a stern face to scold me, but before she could finish, there was a sudden rush of footsteps outside, followed by the clang of armor, and then a series of blood-curdling screams. I was about to scream in terror, but Mother quickly covered my mouth. She pulled me out the back door of our room and up the mountain. I had never endured such hardship. After a few steps, I started crying that I couldn't run anymore. Mother looked behind us with a panicked expression and slapped me across the face. "Jocelyn Thorne, if you want to live, you run with me." It was the first time my mother had ever hit me. I was stunned and terrified. I gathered my skirts and ran with all my might. The men behind us were in hot pursuit. Thankfully, the mountain was dense with trees, and we ran and hid. Mother tore off my fine dress, and she stripped off her own lavish robes as well. We ran in our undergarments from dawn until dusk. I was exhausted. Mother carried me into a cave to hide. She said, "Jocelyn, if we don't make it through this, let's be mother and daughter again in the next life." I didn't understand what she meant. I only knew that with her protecting me, I would be safe. I clung to her waist and quickly fell asleep. When the sun rose, it was eerily quiet outside. Mother ventured out to check and found that our pursuers were gone, but we didn't dare turn back. We continued up the mountain. Halfway up, Mother saw a simple, crude hut. She checked the surroundings, and once certain it was safe, we took shelter there. My mother and I were from a noble family, attended by servants since birth. Now, having to do everything ourselves was a struggle. It took us a whole week to go from knowing nothing to being able to feed ourselves. At first, we could only gather wild fruits. Later, we learned to catch fish from the lake. I thought my mother was the most capable woman in the world. After a month on the mountainside, seeing that no one was pursuing us, Mother grew bold and led me down the mountain. When we reached the spot where we had discarded our clothes, we saw a mother and daughter of similar age to us, their own clothes disheveled. Only then did we understand why the pursuit had stopped. Mother kowtowed 3 times to them, saying it was in gratitude for saving our lives. I copied my mother and bowed to them as well. We lived on the mountainside for another month. I begged Mother to take me home, but she said the time wasn't right. A year later, Mother found an infant. Seeing him wailing with his mouth wide open, I begged her to keep him. Life in the mountains was simple but peaceful. Though Mother would sit by the window and sigh every day, she no longer wept silently. I thought our lives would continue this way, but everything changed when we found the injured Ethan Valerius. It was my stubborn insistence that saved him. I thought he would be like Ronan, someone to grow up with. I cared for him meticulously, saving all the best food for him, hoping he would recover quickly and play with Ronan and me. But he was different from Ronan. His gaze was deep and unreadable. Though he was polite to me, I could feel the command in his tone, and it made me very unhappy. I deliberately picked fights with him, wanting him to coax me, wanting him to be like Ronan and revolve around me. But not only did he not coax me, he always made me cry. I angrily demanded that Mother send him away, but she said since I had saved him, I had to be responsible for him to the end. I started to get along with him properly. I discovered he was a bit like I used to be back at the Prime Minister's residence stubborn. I started to play all sorts of games with him. After all, I just wanted a playmate, and Ronan was too young. He was just right. But I secretly fell in love with him. I stopped antagonizing him and became his little shadow. I followed him around all day, telling him I wanted to marry him. He said he would marry me once he had achieved everything he wanted. I didn't care what he wanted to achieve. I just knew he would marry me. That day, Mother left early in the morning. When she returned, she took him away and he never came back. I blamed Mother, but she held me and told me, from now on, stay away from anyone with the surname Valerius. That night, I felt Mother was acting strangely, but I was too tired and fell asleep in her arms. Before dawn, Mother urgently hid Ronan and me in an empty rice urn, warning us not to come out no matter what happened. I nodded obediently, but through a crack in the urn, I saw that woman, Jayati, poison my mother. After Mother died, I didn't cry. I took Ronan and buried her, then sent Ronan to a scholar's house to study. As I left, I told him, from today on, you must rely on yourself. Do not contact me unless I contact you, understand? Ronan clung to my leg, crying sister over and over. I pushed him down forcefully and ran away. I had to avenge my mother. I had to find that woman. At first, I tried to contact the Prime Minister's residence. I waited outside the gates day after day, until I saw the girl who looked 5 or 6 like me. Only then did I understand what Mother meant when she said we could never go back. All my money had been given to Ronan's teacher. I had nowhere to go, and I needed to earn a lot of money for Ronan's education. I heard that the House of Spring Dreams was the best place to gather information and make money easily. At that time, my mind was set on 2 things, Ronan's education and avenging my mother. Without a moment's hesitation, I went to the House of Spring Dreams. I looked up at the sign and felt that this was where I belonged. I was 8 years old. I spent 3 years at the House of Spring Dreams, learning the zither and dance from the other girls. At 11, I was registered as a courtesan, one who entertained but did not sell her body. I began to secretly inquire about Jayati and was shocked to learn that the woman was in the palace. I started practicing my dancing relentlessly, wanting to become famous, to climb the social ladder by attracting the powerful. But there were too many talented dancers. I had to take a different path. At 13, I wore a red silk gown and danced in the snow for an entire night in the dead of winter. That night, all the nobles of Yuan came. They threw banknotes at me like confetti. I knew my first step had succeeded. I never expected my first client to be Valerius. The moment he opened the door and walked in, I recognized him as my moonbeam. But he didn't seem to recognize me. He talked with me for a long time, drank the wine I warmed for him, and asked me why I had such a face. He seemed drunk, yet not drunk. He pushed me down, murmuring the name Jocelyn Thorne. I entertained but did not sell my body. Since he had taken my virtue, I insisted on leaving with him, but he wouldn't take me. Later, after many inquiries, I learned that my moonbeam was the supreme ruler of Yuan. How could a man like him enter the House of Spring Dreams? I began to spend a great deal of money to find out why he had come to the brothel. One of the girls in the house had a lover, a high-ranking court official. She said the palace was looking for a woman who resembled the empress to be sent to Dongli for a peace offering marriage. The empress he had married so soon, but I still wanted to enter the palace, to find Jayati and avenge my mother. Valerius was my only lifeline to the palace. I had to grasp it. I started spreading rumors about the resemblance between myself and Empress Jocelyn Thorne. I wanted to see Valerius one more time, to explain what happened back then, to beg him to let me into the palace to avenge my mother. But he never came, and my monthly courses stopped. Behind everyone's back, I nervously saw a doctor, only to find out I was pregnant with Valerius's child. I thought I held a trump card for negotiating with him, but it turned out to be my death warrant. That day, it snowed heavily. Valerius brought many soldiers and surrounded the entire House of Spring Dreams. He stood before me, his face cold, completely different from the man I had known. I knelt in terror, begging for mercy, only to have him order me to try on a wedding gown for the peace-offering marriage. I couldn't go. I still had to avenge my mother. I told him I was carrying his child, thinking he would show some compassion. I never imagined he would be so cruel as to force me to lose the child. I fell gravely ill. I wanted to tell him I was the little girl from all those years ago, but his coldness terrified me. I was afraid that if I told him, he would still send me away, and I would lose my last shred of dignity. He still had me sent away on the wedding sedan to Dongli. Before I left, I saw Ronan. Seeing him bound and held on the ground, I clenched my fists and dared not make a sound, afraid that Valerius was testing me, afraid that if I displeased him, he would take Ronan's life. I obediently got into the sedan chair, but I couldn't stop worrying about Ronan. I decided to take a gamble. I bit my finger and wrote Moonbeam, a name only we knew, on my handkerchief, hoping he would spare Ronan. I hated myself for my powerlessness. Not only had I failed to avenge my mother, but I was about to lose my own life. King Vorlag was just as cruel as the legends said. I thought if I swallowed my pride and submitted to him, I could survive. But I was wrong. A man like him had no honor. The moment I was thrown into the military brothel, I finally understood that sometimes living is harder than dying. But I had come this far. If I died now, all my previous suffering would be for nothing. I never expected Valerius to come and rescue me. He brought me back to the palace in Yuan, the place I had once dreamed of entering. But he confined me, forbidding me from leaving the Jade Clarity Pavilion, and allowed those two young maids to bully me. I figured he was like any other man, disgusted by a tainted woman like me, but unwilling to let me go. That day, I was feeling suffocated and had long been annoyed by Willow. I knew she was the Empress's maid, so I deliberately provoked her, wanting to see how much power Valerius had given the Empress. It wasn't until I was thrown into the lake that I was certain. Valerius didn't care about me at all. I thought I would surely die, but by a twist of fate, I came face to face with Jayati. She was shouting to have me dragged out and beaten to death. I deliberately provoked her further, wanting her to kill me. That way, Valerius, out of gratitude for me saving him, would surely punish her in some way. I never thought Jocelyn Thorne would plead for me. This imposter, using my name and living my life, was now playing the good person in front of me. What right did she have? In that moment, I suddenly didn't want to die anymore. I still wanted to avenge my mother. Valerius said he would help me investigate the past. I believed him. Even if he didn't love me, my mother had lost her life for him. He could not forget that debt. The day Jocelyn Thorne sought me out, I had already made up my mind. I would ask her to send me out of the palace. I would hide away where no one could find me and live out my days in solitude. But the moment I saw Ronan's face, I wanted to tear her to shreds. I remembered what Madame Maeve had said. What you cannot have becomes an obsession, and what you owe becomes a debt you can never forget. Using Jocelyn's plan, I had myself hidden behind the archery target. I wanted Valerius to kill me with his own hands. I wanted Jocelyn to bear the weight of his remorse and fury. I wanted her to live the rest of her life in my shadow. As the arrow pierced my heart and I fell from the city wall, I thought I heard my mother's voice. She said she had come to take me home. King Vorlag kept me in his grand tent. At daybreak, Dongli maids entered with hot water and clean clothes. I wrapped myself in a blanket, my head bowed, my voice trembling slightly. Just leave them there. I can dress myself. I looked up and met the maids' disgusted glares. They made no effort to be discreet, even deliberately raising their voices. I heard Yuan is a land of propriety. I can't believe the princess they sent is so shameless. Her disgusting behavior last night is the talk of the entire Dongli court. I don't know how someone so shameless can bear to live. If I were her, I'd have smashed my head against that pillar. Smash my head? If I had wanted to die, I would have bitten my tongue off on the road to Dongli. If I died, that would be the end of it for me. But what about Ronan? I couldn't be so selfish. Even for Ronan, I had to survive in Dongli. I lowered my eyes and smiled, then threw off the blanket and walked barefoot across the floor. Under the maids' shocked gazes, I slowly put on the clothes they had brought. I was 8 years old when I first went to the House of Spring Dreams. Burying my mother had used up all my silver. My brother's teacher was pressing me for tuition fees. With nowhere else to go, I walked alone to the entrance of the House of Spring Dreams. I stared at Madame Maeve, wringing my hands. Though I was terrified, I gritted my teeth and negotiated. I want to sell myself for 100 gold coins. Madame Maeve smiled charmingly at me. She pinched my little face, looking me over. Tusk, she said, indeed a beauty in the making. But a woman's beauty alone is the cheapest thing there is. What other talents do you have? At that time, I had spent my days with my mother in our mountain hut. Besides fishing and chopping wood, all I did was pick and arrange flowers. I proudly told Madame Maeve everything I could do. Her face fell. "If you want to enter my house of spring dreams, you'll have to do the work of the flesh." I didn't understand, but I knew I wouldn't get the 100 gold coins from her. I grabbed her hand, crying, "I can learn anything. I'm a fast learner. I need money. I'll do anything if you give me money." Perhaps because I was so young, Madame Maeve had the conscience not to make me receive clients. Instead, she had me learn the zither and dance from the other girls. At 13, to make a name for myself in Yuan, I danced for an entire night in the snow, wearing only a thin layer of clothing and simple shoes, nearly ruining my legs. Madame Maeve scolded me for being too hard on myself. She said I looked delicate, but I was a hard-headed woman who refused to admit defeat. I was indeed hard-headed, the kind who would do anything to achieve her goals. I tied the intricate sash of my dress and put the jewelry on my wrists and ankles. Looking at the daringly revealing dancing costume, I threw the hairpin the maids had prepared on the floor and simply tied my long hair into a bun. Every girl at the House of Spring Dreams had her own way of pleasing men. Meeting the maids' venomous glares, I let out a sweet laugh and touched my stomach. "Sisters, I'm hungry. Is there anything to eat?" One of the maids rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with disgust. "The king ordered us to take you to the barracks." To the barracks? After a whole night of torment, King Vorlag still wouldn't leave me alone. There was a fighting pit in the Dong Li barracks. It was where they threw captured slaves to fight to the death for the soldiers' entertainment. When I was brought in, the pit was surrounded by soldiers, cheering excitedly, as if I were the prize kill from their hunt. I spotted King Vorlag in the crowd at once. He looked at me with cold eyes, his voice as chilling as if it came from hell. "I hear the women of Yuan are skilled dancers. Dance for my warriors. If you dance well, I will grant you your life." I clenched my fists and stared at him, then gave him a seductive smile and curtsied in the manner of the House of Spring Dreams. In the silent fighting pit, with no music, I began to dance on my tiptoes. King Vorlag hadn't given me any shoes, and the ground of the pit was covered in sand. Every step was excruciating, but I wasn't afraid. I just wanted to live. Hearing the cheers from outside grow louder and louder, I danced on until the ground of the pit was stained pink. My legs numb, I stood in the middle of the pit, finishing my last move. I bowed to everyone, my hopeful gaze landing on King Vorlag's face. But I did not see the answer I wanted. His face was cold as he threw a bamboo tube at my head. "A brothel girl dares to marry me under the title of a princess?" At his words, I stared at him in terror, my eyes fixed on the bamboo tube at my feet, not daring to move. If Ethan Valerius had sent me to Dong Li for this marriage, all my previous records should have been destroyed. How did King Vorlag know? King Vorlag brandished a knife, pointing it at my neck through the iron bars of the cage. "I hate liars more than anything. You, the Emperor of Yuan, you will all die." My body trembled, and I fell to my knees with a thud, denying and begging for mercy. "Your Majesty, you must be mistaken. I am a princess of Yuan. How could I be a brothel girl? Even if I had all the courage in the world, I would not dare to deceive you in a marriage between our two nations." King Vorlag looked at me with a cold expression, then slashed the chain on the cage with his knife. He threw his head back and laughed maniacally. "Warriors, I give this whore to you. Tonight, you will enjoy this woman from Yuan." I shook my head frantically at King Vorlag. "No, Your Majesty, please give me another." The cage door was thrown open by a group of soldiers. Their eyes red, they rushed towards me. I scrambled to the back of the cage, but they were too fast. They grabbed my legs, dragged me up, and held me down, tearing the dress from my body. More and more soldiers poured in, lining up, impatiently taking their turns with me. Hopeless and numb, I stared at the bloodthirsty and cruel King Vorlag outside the pit and gave a bitter, self-mocking smile. Never trust any man. They will not hesitate to push you into hell. By the time the soldiers left, the sun was high in the sky. I lay in a pool of blood in the middle of the fighting pit, so weak that even breathing was difficult. I struggled to my feet, dragging my nearly shredded body, and slowly made my way to a corner. I huddled there, burying my head in my arms, which were covered in wounds, and softly hummed a lullaby my mother used to sing to me. After a few lines, tears streamed uncontrollably from my eyes. I tried to wipe them away with the back of my hand, but it only smeared the blood and grime. Finally, I covered my face with my bloody hands and sobbed. "Mother, what did Shishi do wrong? Why are they doing this to me?" King Vorlag threw me into the military brothel. On my first day there, I saw soldiers carry a woman out, their faces filled with disgust. The woman was naked, her body covered in sores, not a patch of healthy skin to be seen. Her limbs were bent at unnatural angles, like broken branches held together only by skin. I stumbled back in horror and fell to the ground. I had seen a body like that before. At the House of Spring Dreams, Sister Yao had died of such a disease. After she died, Madame Maeve had complained about the bad luck while taking all the girls to see a doctor and get medicine, terrified that the disease would spread. Later, I learned from the other girls that Sister Yao had contracted a venereal disease. It was highly contagious and a death sentence for anyone who caught it. I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. I demanded a military doctor to prescribe medicine for us, but all I got was a brutal beating. I lay on my straw mat, barely conscious. Ironically, the beating spared me a few days of torment. Lately, more and more women had fallen ill. Of the dozens of us, only a dozen or so remained. The soldiers seemed to have vanished. We hadn't seen a single one in half a month. An older woman said that Dong Li and Yuan were at war. I never thought Ethan Valerius would lead the army himself. When I saw him, I was with the other women trying to flee Dong Li. He sat high on his warhorse, looking down at me. He said, "I've come to take you home." Upon returning to Yuan, I fell ill. I couldn't stop coughing, and every night I would be consumed by a high fever. The royal physicians took turns trying every method they knew, but nothing worked. They said I had contracted a foul disease in Dong Li and was beyond saving. I believed them. I even thought I had syphilis, that my body was covered in pustules that would burst at the slightest touch. I couldn't sleep, night after night, scratching my skin raw. Ethan Valerius worried about me and had maids watch me in shifts to stop me from scratching. But though I had been sick for so long, he had never once come to see me. The physician's medicine was delivered daily, but the physician himself grew lazy and stopped coming. The maids watching me, afraid of catching my illness, would pinch my nose with a cloth and pour the bitter concoction down my throat, not caring if I could swallow. Everyone was waiting for me to die, but gradually I started to get better. When is this woman finally going to die? I can't stand taking care of her for another day. Why did His Majesty even bother saving a worthless woman like her? It's just causing trouble for us. Don't say that. I heard His Majesty personally brought her back from Dong Li. I heard he took care of her the whole way back. He must treasure her. Treasure her? She was a girl from the House of Spring Dreams. How could a woman from a place like that catch His Majesty's eye? You don't understand. The women from the House of Spring Dreams are all vixens. Who knows what tricks she used on His Majesty during the journey. Even the royal physician said she was a lost cause, but His Majesty insisted on saving her. I snorted in anger and struggled to open my eyes, wanting to see what these rude and gossipy maids looked like. At the House of Spring Dreams, maids like them would have had their tongues cut out by Madame Maeve and been sold off. Seeing the two young maids sitting by the door, I coughed deliberately. "Water!" The maids ran over, their faces a picture of disbelief. The bolder one poked me. "Are you alive or dead?" I licked my dry lips. "Water!" The maid's eyes widened, and she ran outside, shouting, "Someone, come quickly, Miss Rhiannon is awake." After examining me, the royal physician shook his head in disbelief. Incredible, it was a fatal illness, yet she has woken up. I nodded at the physician, my voice weak. Perhaps heaven took pity on me and couldn't bear to let me go. The physician nodded. "You are indeed very fortunate, miss." "Very fortunate." My Shishi is, of course, very fortunate. It was the first time I had seen Ethan Valerius since returning to Yuan. He was even thinner than on the day he had sent me away. He dismissed everyone and sat by my bed, taking my hand. "Shishi, you have suffered. Why didn't you tell me sooner that you were the little girl who saved me? If I had known, I would never have let you go to Dong Li." I slowly pulled my hand from his. "Your Majesty, this servant is tainted. I do not wish to stay in the palace. I beg your Majesty to send me back to the House of Spring Dreams." Ethan Valerius's hand paused. He didn't try to take mine again, but let his fall to his side. "You're still angry with me, aren't you? I know I have failed you. I have wronged you and our child. Now that I know you are the little girl who saved me, I will take good care of you. I can never send you back to a place like the House of Spring Dreams. There are plenty of places for you to live in this palace. Stay here and rest. I will have the royal physicians attend to you to make sure there are no lasting ailments." I clenched my fists and looked up at his sincere face. I knew I shouldn't ask, but he was the one who had brought me to this point. I just wanted to know if he felt more guilt or more love for me. "Then, will you marry me?" His expression faltered, a complex look flashing in his eyes. "Shishi, you should focus on getting well. We can talk about other things once you have recovered." Watching him hurry away, I lowered my head and gave a bitter smile. "If you are unwilling to give me anything, why hold me captive?" I had a long dream. In my dream, I was back in the house on the mountainside. Life was hard there, but the days with my mother were sweet. My memory of my father was blurry. Sometimes I would dream of that hazy face, and upon waking, I would immediately ask my mother about him. But my mother never told me who my father was. She forbade me from asking. Every time I did, she would get angry and tell me my father was dead. I didn't want to upset her, so I stopped asking. When I was 4 or 5, my mother found my younger brother, Ronan, while gathering herbs in the mountains. The day she brought him home, she sat by the window and sighed for a long time. At dawn, she held Ronan and decided to take him to a family down the mountain. I clung to her leg, begging her not to send him away. I said I could eat less, pleaded with her to let me keep this family member. My mother was soft-hearted and kind. Though she agreed for my sake, I knew she couldn't bear to part with him either. To raise Ronan, I followed my mother to the river every day to wash clothes, to the mountains to gather herbs, and I even learned to spear fish in the river. One day, while we were washing clothes by the river, we saw Ethan Valerius, covered in blood, floating downstream. I was terrified and clung to my mother, sobbing. My mother abandoned the laundry and pulled me home. As soon as we got back to our hut, she locked the doors and windows. She stared at me with terror in her eyes, stroking my hair, muttering over and over, "The heavens over Yuan are about to change." I didn't understand what she meant, but I couldn't stop worrying about the blood-covered man. Was he dead? If not, what if he drifted to the back mountain and was eaten by the wild beasts there? The more I thought, the more scared I became. I grabbed my mother's hand and pointed outside. "Mother, let's go save him." My mother snapped back to reality and immediately shook her head. "No, we can't. It will bring disaster upon us." I didn't understand. Why would saving someone bring disaster? "Mother, you're raising my brother. Why can't we save him? He looked so pitiful. If he gets eaten by the beasts because of us, I'll regret it for the rest of my life." My mother frowned at me, hesitating for a long time before muttering, "We can't." She wouldn't let me leave, watching me like a hawk. No matter how much I begged, she wouldn't let me go. That night, after she fell asleep, I quietly unlatched the door and ran out. My heart pounding, I followed the riverbank towards the back mountain. As I got closer, the howls of the beasts from the mountain terrified me so much that I fell to the ground, sobbing. After a while, I realized the person I was looking for was on the bank not far away. I scrambled to my feet and ran to him. I struggled to turn him over, and when I confirmed he was still breathing, I sighed in relief and sat on the ground, holding him until dawn. As the sun began to rise, I heard my mother's voice. I clung to her arm, crying and begging her to save him. My mother couldn't refuse me and carried him back home. After he woke up, my mother told him sternly that his name was Fang Yuiming, and no matter who asked, that was his name. Ethan Valerius stared at my mother for a long time, then nodded solemnly. The day he left, my mother said she was going out to sell herbs. I woke up very early that day and saw clearly that the basket on her back was empty. Not long after she returned, she called him outside. When she came back, he was gone. I asked my mother where he had gone. She said he had gone home. I burst into tears, blaming her. I told her I was going to marry Moonbeam. Now that he was gone, where would I find him? My mother held me and spoke for a long, long time. She told me not to look for Fang Yuiming. She told me that when I grew up, I should stay away from all men with the surname Valerius and live a quiet, simple life with Ronan. That night, my mother uncharacteristically let Ronan and me sleep in her bed. She gently patted my back, telling me to live a peaceful life, to live well. The next morning, our simple hut was filled with people in lavish clothes. Ronan and I were hidden by my mother in the rice urn. I watched as one of the women handed a cup of wine to my mother. When she refused to drink, they held her down and poured it down her throat. After drinking the wine, my mother collapsed on the floor, clutching her stomach and writhing in agony. She looked up at the woman before her and cursed at her with venomous eyes. "Giadi, you will get what you deserve." Before she could finish, she spat out a mouthful of blood, fell to the ground, and never moved again. "Mother, I recovered well and was able to walk within half a month, but I was confined to the Jade Clarity Pavilion. Every time I tried to step outside, the two gossipy maids would kneel before me, begging me to go back inside and rest. I stood helplessly at the door, gazing at the free sky outside the palace walls. Ethan Valerius hadn't visited me once during this time. According to the two maids, he was busy preparing for the Empress's coronation. "Can I just go for a walk?" I sat at the table, looking at the empty teapot, and placed my empty cup upside down. "Miss Rhiannon, please don't make things difficult for us. The palace is in an uproar with preparations for the coronation. It's not a good time for you to be out and about. If you accidentally offend someone important, it'll be our heads." The young maid spoke pitifully, but her eyes were filled with contempt and disgust. I pushed myself up from the table and walked towards the door. Suddenly, I was tired of being told what to do. I had to be willful just this once. "And what if I insist on going out?" The maid was furious. She frowned at me, her hands on her hips, looking ready to discipline me. "Miss Rhiannon, let me be frank with you. It was His Majesty who ordered that you are not to leave the Jade Clarity Pavilion. All the masters in this palace are respectable ladies from official families. You have a bad background, and you were sent to Dongli for a marriage. I heard His Majesty rescued you from a military brothel. The masters of the rear palace are not happy that His Majesty is keeping you here, and even the officials in the court disapprove. Now everyone in the palace avoids the Jade Clarity Pavilion. They say they're afraid of catching some foul disease if they get too close." Slap. I struck the maid across the face. She stared at me, stunned, then the next second, she gritted her teeth, rolled up her sleeves, and lunged at me. "You worthless prostitute, you dare to hit me. Do you know who I am? I am the Empress's personal handmaiden, Willow. If it weren't for you, I would be with King Mei and Kinxiu, helping Her Majesty with the coronation. I haven't even caused you any trouble, and you dare to lay a hand on me? Today, I'll teach you that in the rear palace, a worthless woman like you can die, and no one would care." Willow grabbed my hair and aimed for my face. "You vixen, I'm going to tear that face of yours apart." I dodged her hand, but she slapped me hard on the ear. The force of the blow made my ear ring. I grabbed her hand, but still weak from my illness, I was no match for her. Seeing that I was losing, Willow turned and glared at the younger maid, who was trembling with fear by the door. "Chungxiang, what are you staring at? Get over here and help me hold this whore down." Chungxiang didn't dare to disobey Willow. She shuffled over and, copying Willow, grabbed my arm. I was already weak, and it was 2 against 1. The moment Chungxiang joined in, I was pinned to the floor. Chungxiang held my arms while Willow pulled my hair and slapped me viciously. She targeted my weak spots, and soon my nose was bleeding. The blood trickled into my mouth, the metallic taste making me nauseous. I retched, vomiting the bitter contents of my stomach all over Willow. Willow stared at me in disgust, then dragged me outside by my hair. "Since you find me so disgusting, I'll let you sober up in the lake." Together, Willow and Chungxiang pushed me into the pond outside the Jade Clarity Pavilion. The early spring water was bone-chilling. I knew how to swim, but in that moment I had no desire to struggle. I held my breath and let myself sink to the bottom, my clenched fists slowly relaxing. I saw my mother in the distance, walking towards me. I took her hand and rested my head on her shoulder. "Mother, she was wrong. I shouldn't have disobeyed you and gone looking for Ethan Valerius. I'm so tired, Mother. I don't want to find Giadi anymore. I want to go with you. Don't die." I struggled to open my eyes, my surroundings hazy. I wasn't dead. "Insolent whore, how dare you cause trouble in the rear palace, men? Drag her out and give her 20 strokes of the cane." Hearing the voice, I struggled to lift my head and stared in shock at the richly dressed noblewoman sitting on the couch. Dowager Giadi. I dug my nails into my palm, the pain instantly clearing my head. I squeezed my eyes shut and opened them again. Though the woman before me was older than I remembered, I was certain she was the one who had given my mother the poison. Giadi frowned, her voice laced with anger. "How dare you glare at me, you whore? First, gouge out her eyes." At her command, the palace attendants who were dragging me out stopped. They held me down, forcing my head back, and brought a sharp object towards my eyes. Seeing this, I threw my head back and laughed coldly, mimicking my mother's tone. "Giadi, you will get what you deserve." Giadi's face instantly turned pale. She stood up, strode towards me, pushed the attendants aside, and grabbed my hair, slapping me across the face. She squinted at me, her voice filled with fear and malice. "Who are you, you whore?" I stared at Giadi and smiled. I had been ready to die and join my mother. But now, by a stroke of fate, Giadi herself had come to me. In that case, I would drag this broken body of mine and fight her to the end. I licked the blood from my lips and sneered. "Did you think no one knew what you did back then? Judging by your title, you must be of high rank. I wonder, if His Majesty knew that you were one of the people who tried to kill him, would he still grant you such a high honor?" Giadi squinted at me, slowly releasing my hair. She rested her hand on her maid's arm and, her previous fear gone, looked down at me with disdain. "It seems I let my anger get the better of me. Men, drag this whore out and beat her to death." "Mother, you mustn't. This woman is His Majesty's savior. If he finds out we've had her killed, he will be displeased. And with the coronation so close, His Majesty has granted a general amnesty. A death in the rear palace at this time would be inauspicious. Mother, please calm down. Why not keep this whore for now? We can kill her after the coronation." I slowly turned my head and met the woman's eyes, so similar to my own. I sneered, "An impostor can ascend to the throne of Empress. How laughable." The woman looked at me and smiled. "Even if I am an impostor, His Majesty will still make me his Empress. You've been in the palace for some time now. If His Majesty truly wanted you in his harem, it would only take a single edict. Yet he has left you here without a title. Do you know why?" Of course, I knew why. He was disgusted by me. In truth, I was disgusted with myself. I had already decided to die. Why did they have to interfere and save me? They could have their coronation. What did my life or death have to do with them? And now, after saving me, they wanted to kill me. The people in this palace were truly mad. But now that I had found Giadi, if I gave up, I would not be able to rest in peace. Even if I couldn't kill her with my own hands, I would turn this palace upside down. Madame Maeve used to say that in a war between women, it's not about who is stronger, but who can make a man's heart ache more. I knelt before the woman and slammed my head on the floor, again and again. This humble servant knows she should not have improper thoughts, but I should never have been dragged into this palace intrigue. It was I who took your place, Your Majesty the Empress, in the marriage to Dong Li. His Majesty said that King Vorlag was infatuated with a face like yours, which is why he forced me into the wedding gown and sedan chair. If I did not bear some resemblance to you, how would I have ended up in such a state?" I slammed my forehead on the ground with all my might, and soon it was burning with pain. The woman frowned at me, crumpling the handkerchief in her hand. She looked at Giadi, a flash of panic in her eyes. "Nonsense. What do you mean you look like me? You look nothing like me. You, His Majesty, the Emperor, has arrived." At the announcement, I quickly pressed my forehead to the ground and knelt properly. "Ethan Valerius, you have used me for so long. Now it's my turn to use you." Ignoring Giadi's protests, Ethan Valerius sent me back to the Jade Clarity Pavilion. This time, he lifted my confinement, gave me 2 clever new maids, and told me I could do as I pleased without having to answer to anyone. But he neither punished nor made the 2 maids who pushed me into the lake apologize. The matter was simply dropped. I looked up at him. I hadn't seen him in days, and his face was etched with fatigue. I reached out and took his arm. He tried to pull away, but seeing the pleading in my eyes, he sat down across from me. I poured him some tea, only to find the pot was still empty. Ethan Valerius was displeased and was about to reprimand the new maids, but I stopped him by placing my hand on his. "Your Majesty, after you left all those years ago, my mother was murdered. The person who killed her was none other than Giadi. She knows she shouldn't say such things to stir up trouble, but my mother died to save you. The woman who killed her is living a life of comfort in this palace. My mother's spirit will not be able to rest in peace." Ethan Valerius frowned and slowly nodded. "I will personally investigate this matter. If it is true, I will not let her off lightly." My hand tightened around my teacup. "The coronation is approaching. If you are busy, you don't need to come here." I promised to marry you back then. Now I have broken my word. You can blame me, be angry with me, but don't hate me. I thought that once I became the supreme ruler, I could do as I pleased. But only after ascending the throne did I realize how powerless I truly am. Jocelyn is the Prime Minister's daughter. He holds a high position in the court. If I want to secure my throne, I must forge alliances. Valerius suddenly grabbed my hand. Wait a little longer. Once my throne is secure, I will give you a title. I lowered my eyes and said nothing. Jocelyn Thorne was right about one thing. If he wanted to, he could give me a title with a single word. Why make me wait? Before the coronation, a grand banquet was held in the palace. All officials of the 5th rank and above could attend with their families, a celebration for both the court and the common people. On the morning of the banquet, as soon as the sun rose, I sent my 2 maids out to join the festivities. They thanked me profusely and ran off. Watching their joyful figures, I couldn't help but smile. I was once that cheerful. The girls at the House of Spring Dreams used to sigh about how carefree I was. Back then, I envied their composure and grace. Now, it seemed that envy was best left behind. It's so lively outside. Aren't you going to have a look? I opened my eyes and saw Jocelyn Thorne standing at the door in simple clothes. I frowned, stood up, and curtsied. What can I do for you, Your Majesty the Empress? Jocelyn didn't speak. She walked to the table and sat down. The Dowager Giatti has been placed under house arrest. Giatti under house arrest? I looked up at Jocelyn, a flicker of shock in my eyes. I thought Valerius was just paying lip service, but he had actually investigated. Jocelyn lowered her eyes and smiled. Although His Majesty is unwilling to let you into the palace, you still hold an important place in his heart. You only mentioned it once, and he took it to heart. Sometimes I truly envy you. You are the lowest of prostitutes, yet you have won His Majesty's heart. And me? I am the Prime Minister's daughter, yet all I have is this immense power, not the heart I desire. I looked at Jocelyn, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. Madame Maeve always said that no woman would willingly expose her weakness to you unless she had already figured out a way to get rid of you. I smiled sweetly at Jocelyn. No matter what, there can only be one empress. Jocelyn nodded slowly. Yes, I am the empress, the most noble woman in the world. I came today for no other reason than to hear that the prostitutes of the House of Spring Dreams are skilled dancers. I would like to invite you, Miss Rhiannon, to perform a dance at tonight's banquet to liven things up. She wanted me to dance in front of all the civil and military officials. Jocelyn wanted to completely sever any chance I had of entering the palace. When my dance ended, I was met with thunderous applause. Everyone was smiling and drinking, cup after cup. Only Valerius and the Prime Minister looked displeased. It was my first time seeing the Prime Minister, but he felt incredibly familiar. When I was very young, I would often dream of a face I didn't recognize. When I woke up, I would ask my mother if I looked like my father. Every time, she would get angry and say no, that I didn't have a father. But I clearly did. The man whose face was 4 or 5/10 similar to mine, who else could he be but my father? After the banquet, Valerius blocked my path. He had been drinking, and his cheeks were flushed. He grabbed my hand and, ignoring my resistance, dragged me towards his chambers. He threw me onto the bed and looked down at me, his eyes filled with undisguised desire. Shishi, I have wronged you. I should not have sent you to Dongli. If you had not gone to Dongli, I would have kept my promise and married you. But you went to Dongli, and you were in the military brothel. I can't get over it. I miss you so much, but I don't dare to see you. I'm afraid everyone will laugh at me. Jocelyn may not be as good as you, but she comes from a good family and is pure. After I found out you were the little girl who saved me, although I disliked her for deceiving me and taking your place, I couldn't oppose her. What should I do? Valerius held me, the conflict and restraint in his eyes piercing my heart. His conflict meant he had already made a choice. I pushed him away, hiding the disappointment in my eyes. Shishi is having her monthly courses and cannot serve your majesty. Besides, my health is poor. The royal physician said I can no longer engage in such activities. Your majesty should not make things difficult for me. Valerius looked at me and let out a visible sigh of relief. He held my hand and talked about our childhood. Watching his half-hearted reminiscence, I carefully pulled my hand away. He had it wrong. I was the one who had speared the fish for him. He didn't know how to do it at all. That day I fell into the mud pit. It wasn't because I was playing, but to save him. When he was about to run into the mud pit, I told him it wasn't ordinary mud, that he would get stuck if he fell in. He didn't listen, insisted on playing, got stuck, and then started crying. If it weren't for saving him, the camellia-embroidered dress my mother had just made for me wouldn't have gotten dirty, and I wouldn't have been punished by being denied dinner. I turned to look at him. When we were little, I could never get enough of his face. I was young and shameless then, and I would cup his face in my hands and study it carefully. He asked me why I liked his face so much. I said I wanted to marry a man who looked just as handsome. He laughed at me, saying he was the only man in the world who looked that handsome. I was thick-skinned back then and said that in that case, I would marry him. My memory of childhood is a bit hazy, but now that I think about it, his answer was, "When I get everything I want, I will marry you." He only said he would marry me. He never said he would only marry me, or that he would make me his principal wife. He had been clear from the beginning. It was I who had read too much into it. Valerius did not let me stay in his chambers. He had someone escort me back to the Jade Clarity Pavilion through a small side door. Though he said he was sorry, in his heart, he looked down on me. The night before the coronation, Jocelyn Thorne surprisingly sent me a letter. She invited me to her Phoenix Palace at 10 o'clock for a chat. What was there for us to chat about? She wanted to get rid of me quickly and, lacking ideas, wanted my help. But I had no excuse to refuse, and since I couldn't sleep anyway, I threw on a robe and walked towards the Phoenix Palace. The Empress's chambers were truly magnificent. The reception hall alone was several times larger than my entire Jade Clarity Pavilion. "Miss Rhiannon, you are truly a woman of your word." Jocelyn was in a simple robe, her hair unadorned and her face free of makeup. She looked even more like me. Seeing me stare, she lowered her eyes. "I used to think my face was unparalleled until I saw your portrait. That portrait of you still hangs in His Majesty's chambers. Sometimes I wonder where I went wrong. For so many years, His Majesty and I were inseparable. How could a single trip to the House of Spring Dreams make him lose his soul? It wasn't until the day I saw Willow push you into the pond. Even in such a sorry state, your face was still breathtakingly beautiful. Willow is my personal handmaiden. When His Majesty first brought you back, I was the one who offered to have her serve you. His Majesty knew I wanted someone to keep an eye on you, but he agreed without a word. The day you fell into the water, I was the one who told Willow to push you. And when you were rescued, I was the one who deliberately called Jayati to preside over the matter. I actually wanted to use Jayati to get rid of you, but I never expected there was a history between you two." Jocelyn lowered her eyes and smiled. "But it doesn't matter. At least from this, I can see that His Majesty doesn't care much for you either. You see, you nearly lost your life, but all I had to do was act cute with His Majesty, and he wouldn't even punish my handmaiden." Staring at her face, I lowered my eyes and pressed my lips together tightly. Valerius had been clear with me. He liked my face, but Jocelyn could serve as a better substitute. Jocelyn slowly approached me, grabbing my chin. Her face suddenly turned ugly, her eyes filled with malice. "Your mother was a seductive vixen, and she gave birth to a worthless creature like you." She slapped me hard across the face, sending me to the floor. She looked down at me, her embroidered shoe pressing down on the back of my hand. "Aren't you curious why His Majesty, who was so sweet to you, suddenly wanted to send you to Dongli?" I looked up at her and smiled. I had heard correctly that day. The name King Vorlag had called out with such affection was Ah Tong. Is Ah Tong Her Majesty the Empress's pet name? Attacking the heart was the first lesson for any girl at the House of Spring Dreams. At my words, Jocelyn's face trembled and turned pale. She crouched down, grabbed my hair, and glared at me. "Did King Vorlag tell you that himself?" I lowered my eyes. That night, King Vorlag held me and called out the name Ah Tong over and over. His wild passion is truly the stuff of every young girl's dreams. A flash of malice crossed Jocelyn's eyes. She released my hair and threw her head back, laughing. "King Vorlag is dead. You don't need to try to drive a wedge between us. But there is something I want to tell you. Do you know how he found out you were a prostitute from the House of Spring Dreams?" At her words, I clenched my fists and looked at her. "It was you. I went to Dong Li in your place and you wanted me dead." Jocelyn sneered. "You brought that on yourself." Who told you to deliberately throw that handkerchief to His Majesty on your wedding day, letting him know I had impersonated you? Do you know that if it weren't for that handkerchief, the coronation would have happened long ago? I would have been the empress long ago. Why would I have to wait until today? She glared at me, her eyes looking as if they could devour me whole. If it weren't for you, you bitch, Yuan and Dong Li would have had generations of friendship. His Majesty would not have been in such a hurry to attack Dong Li. At this, a tear welled up in Jocelyn's eye, and he would not have died a tragic death. Jocelyn flicked the tear away and walked to a drawer, pulling out a small box. She held it out to me, her smile unsettling. This is a gift I have carefully prepared for you. I wanted to give it to you earlier, but I was afraid you would be too agitated and it would affect your health. Now that you seem to have recovered, this is the perfect time. I stared at the box in her hands, my heart aching for some unknown reason. What is this? Jocelyn placed the box in front of me, her eyes venomous. Go on, open it yourself. My heart pounded in my chest. With trembling hands, I opened the lid. The moment I saw what was inside, I screamed and scrambled away, staring in horror at the flap of skin in the box. Ah! I clutched my head and huddled behind a pillar. I covered my eyes, trying to erase the image from my mind. I didn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Ethan Valerius would have protected Ronan. Why was he in that box? My Ronan, my brother, why was he in a box? Ha ha ha. Seeing my reaction, Jocelyn threw her head back and laughed triumphantly. What do you think? I found several skilled palace artisans to peel that face off while he was still alive. Tisk, tisk, look, not a single flaw. It's perfect. I covered my ears, not wanting to listen, but two maids suddenly appeared behind me, grabbing my arms and forcing me to listen. That day, you threw the handkerchief, wanting His Majesty to spare your brother's life. But I wouldn't let you have your way. I had to kill him to satisfy the hatred in my heart. I struggled, screaming at Jocelyn, tears streaming down my face. Why? Why did you do that to him? He was just a child. What did he ever do wrong? She grabbed my chin and took out a black pill from her robes. His mistake was telling His Majesty about the past, ruining my years of planning, and causing the death of King Vorlag. His death is all your fault. If it weren't for you, how could he have died? Jocelyn forced the pill down my throat. She looked at me triumphantly. This pill is called the 7-day intestine rupturing powder. Without the antidote, in 7 days, your intestines will rupture and you will die. Not even the gods will be able to save you then. My face flushed red as I coughed violently. Looking at Jocelyn's smug face, I lowered my head and gave a small, bitter smile. I wiggled my hands, still held by the maids. I've swallowed the pill. What's the point of holding me? Jocelyn gave them a look and they obediently retreated. I watched Jocelyn wipe the tears from her face. If my mother and Ronan saw me cry, they would be sad. I wouldn't cry. I would avenge them. I suddenly smiled at Jocelyn. A murderous glint appeared in her eyes. You can still smile at a time like this? I lowered my eyes. Only a select few can obtain such a secret palace poison. 7 days from now, after the coronation, if His Majesty finds out I died because of you, do you think he will punish you? Jocelyn squinted, a flash of panic in her eyes. What do you mean? I lowered my eyes, clenching my fists tightly. I want Jayati's life. If she dies at tomorrow's ceremony, I am willing to use my life to add to the festivities of the Empress's coronation. Jocelyn stared at me for a long time, then her eyes turned cold. Fine, you don't have long to live anyway. I'll make this deal with you. Wait here tonight, I will give you Jayati's life. I never expected Jocelyn to be so ruthless. By 2 in the morning, news came that Jayati had hanged herself. She smiled at me, her eyes curved like crescent moons. I used to smile like that. Madame Maeve said I looked too much like a respectable lady and had to change. So I practiced the smile of a courtesan in the mirror every day. After a while, it became natural. In truth, with time, many things change. Faces change, smiles change, and hearts change even more. I've done what I promised. What about your end of the deal? I knelt before Jocelyn and kowtowed 3 times as an early memorial for her. Rhiannon Shaw thanks Her Majesty the Empress. The men of Yuan are skilled archers, so any celebration ends with a shot at a prize target. I had Jocelyn arrange for a wooden box, large enough to hold me, with a target on the front and back, to be placed at the highest point of the city wall. At the end of the ceremony, with Ethan Valerius's skill, he would surely hit the bullseye. Then I would fall out of the box, plummeting from the city wall. To be absolutely sure, I had her make the box as narrow as possible, and to place the bullseye as close to my heart as possible. In truth, even if the arrow didn't kill me, a fall from that height would be fatal. Hearing my plan, a look of confusion crossed Jocelyn's face. "Are you seeking death?" I lowered my eyes and gave a sad smile. "I only want to die at his hands." Jocelyn rolled her eyes and walked towards the maids holding the grand red ceremonial robe. "Then, I will let you die a worthy death." Before the ceremony, I asked Jocelyn to have a maid fetch the simple white dress I had embroidered in the Jade Clarity Pavilion. I had intended to surprise Ethan Valerius with it on his coronation day. I had long wanted to leave this palace. He wanted to keep me, but wouldn't give me a title. He was kind to my face, but behind my back, he turned a blind eye to my suffering. Since I couldn't have the love I wanted, I might as well die a spectacular death, one that might leave him with a lasting, painful memory. I never thought it would have a better, more dramatic purpose. Though I disliked Jocelyn, at this moment, I was truly grateful to her. Looking at her in her grand red wedding gown, I put on the white dress embroidered with camellias. I had embroidered the camellias in my mother's style. When stained with blood, they would fully bloom. It would surely be a breathtaking sight, a story to be told for ages. She sneered. "And you're supposed to be the most famous prostitute of the House of Spring Dreams, yet you dress so humbly." I didn't answer. When I fell from the box, she would see just how stunning this dress was. Jocelyn hid me in the wooden box. There were small gaps in the boards, and I peeked out. Ethan Valerius held her hand as they paid homage to heaven and earth. She smiled shyly at him, and his gaze was filled with tenderness. He said he saw her as a substitute, but at this moment, I saw love in his eyes. If he didn't love her at all, how could he tolerate her hurting me time and again? After the ceremony, I was carried by her confidence to the highest point of the city wall. I squinted through the crack and saw Ethan Valerius pick up his bow. Jocelyn stood beside him, staring nervously at me. I gave them a sad, faint smile. My life has been miserable and lowly, but I am a hard-headed woman. When I decide to do something, I see it through. This time, I want nothing for myself, only to avenge Ronan and my mother. With a twang, the arrow left the bow. I slowly closed my eyes. With a thud, the arrow pierced my chest. My body fell backward. With the sound of splintering wood, I fell out of the box. My body drifted down from the city wall like a snowflake. I could hear his heart-wrenching screams from above. In this moment, he must feel pain for me, but it was too late. I was dead. I could no longer feel his pain. With a thump, I hit the stone pavement. "Mother Ronan, I'm coming to find you." I thought I was dead, but my soul separated from my body. I floated slowly in the air. Looking at my body, blooming with camellias, I smiled with satisfaction. I had truly inherited my mother's gift. These camellias were breathtakingly beautiful. My mother said that if a person has a lingering attachment, their soul will wander the earth for 7 days after death. I lifted my arm, looking at my nearly transparent body, and shook my head with a helpless smile. I chose this death. What attachments could I possibly have? She. Ethan Valerius ran frantically from the city wall towards me. He was still in his wedding robes. He stood a short distance from my body, staring at me, his body trembling. He just stood there. The civil and military officials could only stand with him, not daring to breathe. I slowly floated in front of Jocelyn Thorne. Her grand red ceremonial robe was beautiful, different from the one I had worn. Hers was larger, wider, the phoenix embroidered on it exquisite and lifelike. My wedding gown had been ill-fitting, forced onto me by the matrons. The peonies embroidered on it had been drooping, as if they were dying. Jocelyn frowned, but her lips were turned up in a smile. She must be very happy. With me dead, she could finally be at ease. She, wake up. I have so much to tell you. I was wrong. I shouldn't have been disgusted that you were in the military brothel, shouldn't have hated that you went to Dong Li and were taken by King Vorlag. Ethan Valerius knelt before me, his head bowed. The crown on his head must have been too heavy because he unceremoniously threw it to the ground. He carefully reached out and touched my body. How could this happen? Why were you hiding behind the target? She, why did you have to punish me in such a final way? Didn't I say I would take care of you for the rest of your life, that I would protect you? Why didn't you believe me?" Watching his grief-stricken state, I slowly crouched beside him. I reached out and touched the birthmark behind his ear. "Moonbeam, telling lies to the dead will bring retribution." Ethan Valerius struggled to lift me from the ground. He held my body and, with his back straight, solemnly walked towards the city wall. Watching his back, I suddenly remembered a time when I had made him angry as a child. He had stormed off, and I had struggled to keep up in my straw sandals. I was small, with short legs, and I couldn't keep up. I stood still, calling out "Moonbeam," but he wouldn't even slow down. He reached the mountainside, turned around, and saw I was gone. He frantically ran back to find me. When he saw me sitting on a rock, he frowned, even angrier. "Why didn't you keep up?" I pouted, aggrieved. "Moonbeam, you walk too fast." He didn't believe me, his voice sharp. "You were just being lazy. Don't you want me to forgive you?" I jutted out my lip and shook my head, my eyes falling on my scraped feet. I wanted to explain, but he turned and walked away again. He said, "Rhiannon Shaw, if you don't catch up this time, I will never forgive you." In truth, if he had just looked down, he would have seen my bleeding feet. But he wouldn't. He knew his boots were faster than my straw sandals, but he never slowed down to wait for me. The wind picked up on the city wall. It lifted my dress, the blood-soaked camellias dancing in the wind as if they were alive. The birthmark on my abdomen was also exposed by the wind. "Don't look, all of you. Turn away," Ethan Valerius glared at everyone around him. At his command, everyone turned away. Jocelyn stared at the birthmark on my abdomen, a flicker of worry in her eyes. Seeing that everyone had turned away, he held me tightly, his head bowed, a tear falling onto my face. "Didn't you want to marry me? Didn't you want a title? From this day on, I name you noble consort Ryuen, second only to the Empress, one of the two mistresses of the rear palace. I will have you buried in the imperial tombs so that in 100 years we will rest together forever. Then I will personally apologize to you for all eternity. Are you happy?" One of the two mistresses. Even in death, he would not give me the position of his principal wife. So be it, I no longer cared. He could give me whatever title he wanted, bury me wherever he wanted. When I entered the house of Spring Dreams, Madame Maeve had told all of us girls. There was only one place for a girl who died in the house of Spring Dreams, the mass grave on the outskirts of the city. Now, instead of being thrown into a mass grave, I would be interred in the imperial tombs. It was a stroke of great luck. "Your Majesty, this old servant has something to say." A trembling voice, filled with endless sorrow, came from the crowd. I turned to see the Prime Minister kneeling on the ground, his head pressed against the tiles. Ethan Valerius glared at him. What could be so important that it must be said now? The Prime Minister looked up at my body, trembling. "Your Majesty, this old servant has just seen the noble consort's birthmark. It is identical to the one on my young daughter's abdomen." The moment he finished speaking, Jocelyn Thorne stepped forward and knelt before him, pleading with Ethan Valerius. "Your Majesty, my father is old and has been prone to nonsensical ramblings lately. The noble consort must have upset him, causing him to say such outrageous things. Please forgive him." The Prime Minister pushed her away, his eyes downcast, his voice filled with pain. 8 years ago, when you and your mother came to the Prime Minister's residence from the mountains, I had my doubts. Before you even entered the residence, you spread the news that the Prime Minister's wife and daughter had been found. And all the evidence pointed to you, and your mother being my wife and daughter, who had been missing for 4 years. Then the late emperor issued an edict, granting you and your mother titles, and ordering you to the Crown Prince's palace to be a candidate for Crown Princess. I had no choice but to accept it. But in the last 2 years, your mother has become stranger and stranger. Her face has changed so much I can barely recognize her. I have been investigating all these years, but I could never find anything until the banquet the other day when I saw the noble consort. Only then did I know that you are not my Diana and Jocelyn." The Prime Minister stared at Jocelyn, his face flushed with emotion. Jocelyn's face turned ashen. She knelt before Ethan Valerius, kowtowing wretchedly. "Your Majesty, you must not believe the Prime Minister. He has gone mad." Mad? I stared at the Prime Minister's handsome face and touched my own. Though I couldn't feel it, I had long known my mother had lied to me. How could I not have a father? Ethan Valerius was furious. He immediately ordered Jocelyn to be confined to the Phoenix Palace and had my body placed in a coffin. with palace attendants changing the ice around the clock to prevent decay. That same day, he went with the Prime Minister to the Prime Minister's residence. I thought I would stay with the coffin, but my spirit followed him. As soon as we entered the gates of the residence, memories of this place flooded my mind. I stood in the corridor, staring at the budding peach tree in the courtyard, a sudden pang of sorrow in my heart. Though I couldn't cry, I felt an overwhelming sadness. I remembered the swing my older brother had built for me under that peach tree. I was playful and asked him to push me hard. Wanting to make me happy, he pushed me with all his might. I swung so high, kicking my legs in excitement, but I lost my balance and fell onto the stone path. I remembered my face was covered in blood. My brother was terrified. He held me and cried as he ran to find our mother. She held me and wiped the blood from my face, relieved to find it was just a nosebleed and I was otherwise unharmed. But my father was so distraught that he punished my brother and, still not satisfied, chopped down the swing that very night. I resented him for a long time after that. It was only when he promised that my brother would take me to the northern frontiers, when I grew up, that I forgave him. I floated under the peach tree, looking at the marks on the stump where the axe had struck, an indescribable sorrow filling my heart. Why did my mother choose to live with me alone in the mountains rather than return to my father? I followed Ethan Valerius into the reception hall. There, a middle-aged woman in lavish clothes was smiling at us. Her smile was similar to Jocelyn's, and she bore a slight resemblance to my mother, but my mother's eyes were softer. This woman's eyes were upturned at the corners, giving her a harsh look. Upon seeing Ethan Valerius, she immediately knelt. "This servant greets your majesty. Long live the emperor." Ethan Valerius stared at her face and did not bid her to rise. The hand behind his back was clenched into a fist. "I have long heard that your skill with the zither and brush is unparalleled in Yuan. On the way here, I heard the Prime Minister lament that you have not played or painted in many years. I wonder if I might have the honor of having you make an exception for me today?" The kneeling woman's face paled slightly. She frowned, her gaze flickering to the Prime Minister. "My lord, you know that I injured my hand 8 years ago. After narrowly escaping death, I have not touched the zither or brush since. To perform in front of His Majesty now would be an embarrassment and would bring shame upon you." Watching her, I sneered. My mother was an excellent painter. Every spring, she would sit by the window and, with the worst brush and paper, paint a scene of the season. She painted beautifully, able to capture the spirit of spring even with the poorest materials. Every time she finished, I would beg her to teach me, but she would always stroke my head and look off into the distance with a sorrowful gaze. She, a woman's virtue is in her lack of talent. I didn't understand then why she didn't want me to learn anything. Now I think I understand. She was afraid that if I showed any talent, I would attract the attention of malicious people and lose my life. I looked at the Prime Minister. How did he lose my mother and me? "It has been many years since I have heard Diana's zither," the Prime Minister said, squinting at her, a hint of malice in his eyes. "Do you remember, Diana, which song brought us together?" The woman's smile was stiff. "Of course I know. It was Moon Spring. I remember it was your favorite." The Prime Minister's face hardened. "Have you not tired of telling that lie for 8 years? You are not Diana Shaw. Who are you?" The woman knelt straight, her gaze arrogant. "What are you saying, my lord? The late emperor made it clear to you who I was. And you acknowledged me as your wife. Who have you been listening to now, to doubt that I am Diana? If I am not, then who is?" Ethan Valerius sneered. "Still trying to argue at a time like this? Giadi has confessed. If you remain stubborn, that child of hers in the palace will not be spared." At his words, the woman's eyes widened in disbelief. "Impossible. She is the Empress Dowager. No one can touch her. She cannot be dead. Men, bring what I have brought and show it to her." At his command, soldiers entered with a box. They opened it and placed it in front of her. The moment I saw Giadi's head in the box, I felt a wave of nausea. The woman vomited on the spot. She stared at Ethan Valerius in terror. "She was the Empress Dowager you personally named. How could you be so cruel as to kill her?" Ethan Valerius sneered, his face dark. "The one who killed her was your dear daughter, Jocelyn Thorne. It was Jocelyn who had her strangled. I merely granted her wish." I stumbled back in shock. He knew everything. Did he know that I was the one who asked Jocelyn to hide me behind the target? The woman threw her head back and laughed maniacally, shaking her head in denial. Impossible. Jocelyn would never do that. You are all lying to me. Ethan Valerius ordered the soldiers to press her head to the box, his gaze cold. I will give you one last chance. If you do not tell me where the real Diana Shaw is, there is room in this box for your head as well. The woman screamed in terror. I don't know anything. I was just a pawn. I took my orders from Jocelyn. I did whatever she told me to do. I don't know anything. Ethan Valerius sneered. You don't know. Men, bring in her son. I turned to the door and saw the sixth prince, a black hood over his head and his body bound in ropes, being carried in by 4 soldiers. Who dares to tie me up? If I find out, I'll have your entire family executed. Ethan Valerius gave the soldiers a look, and they immediately released the prince and untied him. The sixth prince struggled free, cursing. I'd like to see who dares to mess with me. When the hood came off and he saw Ethan Valerius, the terror in his eyes was palpable. He knelt on the floor, smiling fawningly. Imperial brother, what are you doing here? I thought someone was playing a joke on me. Why did you bring me to the Prime Minister's residence? Is there a surprise for me? Ethan Valerius looked coldly at the woman. Have you made up your mind? The woman nodded frantically, her gaze fixed on the sixth prince. I'll talk. The fake Prime Minister's wife was named Morgana Thorne. She was originally a palace maid in Dongli. Because of her beauty, she was favored by the old king of Dongli a few times and bore him a son, but due to her low birth, she and her son received no title. When the old king died, the new king ordered them to be buried with him. She tearfully begged for their lives and was instead chosen to be a spy in Yuan. Jocelyn Thorne's real name was Lin Jinru. She was the daughter of a dancer in Dongli. When King Vorlag discovered her resemblance to the Prime Minister of Yuan's daughter, he conspired with the spies in Yuan to switch them. Jayati was a princess of the Dongli court who had been sent to Yuan as a bride years ago. With her as an accomplice in the palace, and with King Vorlag's methods, Diana Shaw and her young daughter, Jocelyn, disappeared after going to the mountains to pray. Morgana used Dong Li's secret arts to change her face to look like Diana. She then brought Lin Jinru to the Prime Minister's residence. But the secret art of disguise only lasted for a month, and after that, even if the same method was used, she could only recover 5 or 6/10 of her original appearance. So King Vorlag conspired with Jayati to manipulate the dying late emperor. Jayati forged edicts, first bestowing favors on the Prime Minister's residence, then giving Morgana a title, and finally having Lin Jinru enter the palace as a candidate for crown princess. Not long after the forged edicts were issued, she poisoned the late emperor, and the matter was dropped. Even if the Prime Minister later became suspicious, he wouldn't dare to investigate for fear of offending the late emperor. The late emperor's sudden death threw the court into turmoil. The crown prince, Ethan Valerius, was young, and various factions vied for the throne. Jayati had a son after marrying into Yuan, but he was frail and died before the age of 3. She planned to use the chaos to sneak Morgana's son into the palace, and, with the help of Dong Li's forces, place him on the throne, thus allowing Dong Li to slowly annex Yuan. Every step of Jayati's plan was perfect, but she never expected that my mother and I had survived. That day we went to pray, we were indeed attacked by a group of ruthless men. My mother carried me and ran up the mountain through the back gate of the monastery. The men pursued us, and just as we were about to be caught, a mother and daughter of similar age to us appeared from the forest. The men mistook them for us, killed them, and went back down the mountain. From that day on, my mother secretly gathered news. It wasn't until the news of the Prime Minister's daughter entering the palace as the crown princess to be spread that her last glimmer of hope died. She changed my name and forbade me from leaving the mountain or returning to the Prime Minister's residence. She thought she could protect me that way, but fate had other plans. By a twist of fate, my mother saved Ethan Valerius, who had been driven to the brink of death by Jayati. Not only did she save him, but she also entrusted him to a reliable person. By the time Jayati arrived, he was already safe. Her plan had failed, so in a fit of rage, she poisoned my mother. Listening to Morgana's words, I trembled. They were so monstrous. Ethan Valerius stared at Morgana with cold eyes, then turned to the trembling sixth prince. Drag this Dong Li remnant out and have him caned to death. At his words, Morgana struggled against the soldiers. Your Majesty, spare the sixth prince, he doesn't know anything, it's all my fault, I am willing to die in his place. Hearing the sixth prince's blood-curdling screams from outside, Ethan Valerius clenched his fists and looked at Morgana. "Don't worry, you're next." In the courtyard of the Prime Minister's residence, the mangled bodies of the sixth prince and Morgana lay on the ground. Even after all I had seen in Dongli, the sight still made my scalp crawl. Ethan Valerius had a chair brought out and sat on the steps, staring blankly at the gate. He suddenly turned to the Prime Minister. "My dear Minister, was Shishi very cute as a child?" The Prime Minister paused, then fell at his feet, his voice choked with tears. "That girl, Jocelyn, was spoiled by her brother and mother. She was so mischievous. She was the only daughter in the family, and I doted on her as well, which made her so fearless." The Prime Minister pointed to the peach tree. "I planted this tree the year she was born. I buried a dozen jars of daughter's red wine under it, intending to open them on her wedding day. I never thought I would lose the chance." Ethan Valerius's eyes flickered with a glint of tears. He gestured with his finger. "After Lin Jinru is executed, will you join me in a jar of daughter's red?" The Prime Minister kowtowed heavily. This old servant obeys. Lin Jinru was brought to the Prime Minister's residence by the Imperial Guards. She was still wearing her red wedding gown, though her phoenix crown was slightly askew. She looked at the two bodies on the ground, a flash of panic in her eyes. Then she straightened her back and shook off the guard's hands. "Insolence, I am the Empress of Yuan. How dare you treat me this way?" The guards looked at Ethan Valerius, their grip on her unwavering. Ethan Valerius looked at the poised Lin Jinru with cold eyes. "At this point, do you still think you can hold on to your position as Empress? Your Majesty, we were childhood sweethearts. Even if I have done wrong, can you not spare my life for the sake of my years of loyalty to you? I was just a child when I first came to Yuan. I knew nothing. Even if there were mistakes, they were their mistakes. I was just a pawn they manipulated." "You did nothing wrong?" Ethan Valerius stood up from his chair and slowly walked towards her. "Then let me ask you, who is responsible for the peace-offering marriage with Dongli? Who was it that lured me to the House of Spring Dreams? Who was it that told King Vorlag of Shishi's true identity? And all your sordid affairs with King Vorlag over the years, do you really think I didn't know?" Faced with his relentless questioning, Lin Jinru stumbled back, then laughed. "So you knew all along? I thought my plan was flawless. Since you knew everything, why did you grant me the position of Empress? Why did you let that Rhiannon Shaw go for the marriage? And why, knowing it was my trap, did you still let her walk into it?" At her words, I collapsed on the ground, looking at Ethan Valerius in disbelief. He knew everything. From the day he entered the House of Spring Dreams, he knew it was a trap set by Lin Jinru, but he still went. Not only did he go, but he also made me believe he liked me. He knew about her and King Vorlag, and he knew she was deliberately looking for a substitute for herself, yet he still took my virginity. He even knew that King Vorlag would kill me if he found out I was a prostitute, yet he waited months after I was thrown into the military brothel to rescue me. If I had died then, he would probably have been just as calm as he was now. Ethan Valerius clenched his hands. Because I wanted to personally capture the spies who killed my father and nearly killed me. I had to tear them to pieces to release the hatred that has been buried in my heart for so many years. Do you know how hard it has been for me to find you all these years? As long as I could capture you, I was willing to pay any price." Lin Jinru paused, then smiled. "So you knew all along. When did you know I was the fake Jocelyn Thorne?" "I knew the day you entered the palace." A look of shock crossed her face. "You endured for so many years. Your heart is truly ruthless. Then did you know that Rhiannon Shaw asked me to put her behind the target?" I stared at Ethan Valerius, shaking my head. He couldn't have known. If he had known, how could he have shot that arrow at me? "I knew." Lin Jinru looked at him in disbelief. You knew. Ethan Valerius, is your heart made of stone? You knew everything, so why?" Ethan Valerius clasped his hands behind his back, his fists clenched tightly. "Because if Shishi didn't die, I couldn't give her a proper title. I promised her I would marry her. I would not break my word." I opened my mouth and let out a silent, grief-stricken cry. He killed me, knowing I would die just to give me a title. He was truly heartless. Lin Jinru's smile was strange. She shifted her body. "So do you regret it now?" Ethan Valerius suddenly reached out and grabbed her neck, his eyes murderous. If I had known she was the Prime Minister's real daughter, I would not have had to take the worst path. "You bitch, this is all your fault. I will make you pay for Shishi's life. I will make you go down and personally apologize to her." He choked her, his face contorted with rage. Lin Jinru didn't struggle. She stared at him, a slow smile spreading across her face, and managed to force out the words, "I curse you. To live every day in torment. To never receive Rhiannon Shaw's forgiveness." Ethan Valerius stared at the limp body in his hands and murmured, "If she knew my reasons, she would forgive me." My body lay in the coffin for 3 days. Even with the ice being changed around the clock, it began to decay. Ethan Valerius stared at my body for a long time. I stood beside him, wondering what he was thinking. Suddenly, he smiled, as if speaking to me, or perhaps to himself. "She, Moonbeam has avenged you. I have killed everyone who harmed you. I strangled that Lin Jinru with my own hands. It was all her fault. If it weren't for her, I would never have found you, let alone sent you to Dongli. It was all her design. She just wanted to see me suffer, to see Yuan fall. But she didn't know that I am not as weak as she thought, and my Shishi is not as fragile as she thought. The day I sent you to Dongli, I deliberately used Ronan to threaten you. I knew you would survive for his sake. As long as you were alive, I could eventually rescue you and bring you back to Yuan. I kept my promise, didn't I? Though I never told you any of this, it was a promise I made to you myself. By the way, I have named your mother a first-rank noble lady. Your older brother has become a grand general. I have also bestowed rewards upon the House of Spring Dreams. That madame of yours couldn't stop smiling. I know I have wronged you, but I truly had no choice. I promise I will take good care of your father and brother. After I die, I will come down and atone for my sins. Will you forgive me then?" I sneered in his ear. He was always like this. He made a mistake, then found an excuse to absolve himself of his guilt, as if that would earn him forgiveness and allow him to live without remorse. He wanted me to believe him, but he couldn't even take care of Ronan. How could I believe he would take care of my father and brother? Madame Maeve used to say that a man's words are deceitful. If we only covet their money, we only lose money. If we covet their love, we will lose everything, perhaps even our lives. Ethan Valerius was Ethan Valerius. Moonbeam was Moonbeam. It was I who couldn't tell the difference, who confused the two. Now I see clearly. It's late, but I can finally let go. I no longer love Ethan Valerius. I will forget Moonbeam as well. If there is a next life, I still want to be a girl at the House of Spring Dreams. Though scorned and cursed by the world, we live freely, not having to care about others' opinions, earning our own keep. It's a good life. The day of my burial, it rained heavily. The rain beat against my coffin, a rhythmic farewell. Ethan Valerius arranged for a grand funeral, burying me with the honors of a noble consort. A long procession of musicians played endless, dreary dirges in the pouring rain. I hated such empty laments. They were irritating to listen to. Ethan Valerius sat in his palanquin the entire time, his head bowed, a jar of the Prime Minister's daughter's red wine by his side. Daughter's red was meant for weddings, yet he drank it with such sorrow, wasting the good wine. His cheeks flushed, he watched with mournful eyes as my coffin was sealed in the imperial tomb. I was still noble consort Ryuan. In the end, he never gave me the position of his principal wife. The rain suddenly stopped. The sky cleared, and a golden light shone down on me. My body slowly rose. I ascended into the sky and vanished.